Pete Yost here for the UnBuildIt podcast with a word about our sponsor, Huber Engineered Woods. There are really three reasons why I think Huber Engineered Woods stands out, and it's a big part of why they're a sponsor of our UnBuildIt podcast. First, they develop systems of products. The products are compatible and integrated. Makes our jobs a lot more easy in the field and when specifying. Second is superior tech support. There are really good website resources that they have developed for the application of their products, but they also have an outstanding 800 numbered tech team that really knows their stuff. And the last is a really active technical research and development team with whom I've done a lot of work over the years, and I have a lot of faith in the information I get from them when I have questions about product performance. So that's it. That's our high performance sponsor. Now on to the podcast.
Good day and welcome to the UnBuildIt podcast. I'm Jake Bruton. Today I am joined by my co-host Steve Basic.
Hello.
And Peter Yost does exist because he's here.
I'm here.
And this is a topic we've covered multiple times. Does anybody want to take a guess at what it is and pretend like we didn't just talk about
how great the UnBuildIt podcast is?
Yes. So not the dinner room conversation that we all try to convince our wives to have. No, this is questions and answers. Ooh. So your questions are answers.
Nice. We should do an A and Q sometime.
We should ask the questions.
Well, yeah, we should bring
the answers. Is that like UnBuildIt Jeopardy?
Yeah, you bring the answers and then ask the question.
Jeopardy.
Like, okay, so this is the answer. What's the question?
Well, we kind of did UnBuildIt. UnBuildIt Jeopardy at IBS this year. You weren't there.
You guys cheated. I remember
trivia against Steve and Christine Williamson and handily walked away with the win on that one.
I heard that part.
Yeah.
I have a video of it if anybody wants to watch it. He had all the
answers to the questions prior to him and Chris.
Says the person that helped make sure the answers were going to be okay to... No, so we have... you guys do send in questions, and if you want to send in questions, it's questions@unbuilditpodcast.com. That's the email address you can send them to. If they appear to be pressing, we try to answer as many as we can. We get more than what we can like email respond. We take turns. Actually, when I say we take turns, I think Peter and I answer questions and Steve pretends to not see the emails and just lets us handle it.
He does do a lot of videos on his
I've done
work,
one or two. Sure. And you guys are better at answering the questions. I get frustrated.
It's
that's
because
why
we're better
at it.
Okay.
Well, just an appropriate response is, you're a stupid idiot. Maybe you should get out of building and consider computer science.
Quit wasting my time.
Now I know why we don't do it.
So I don't
Quit wasting our time.
I don't do the Q&As.
Garbage questions.
I actually taught with a guy early in my architecture career, and he used to tell people, he said, maybe you should really consider getting out of architecture and going into computer science.
Gosh. I feel like
where are we?
There's a certain level of insult, but you need to think about a different career. Would hurt.
That's
I mean, if somebody said it to me now, I'd be like, oh, piss off, whatever. But when you're young and not confident, when somebody's like, this is just not for you. Well, let's jump right in. So I have, a handful of questions here, and we'll just go in the order that I dragged and dropped them.
Cool.
The first one's from Paul.
Hello, Paul.
Hi, UnBuildIt podcast. I'm a carpenter from the UK, living and working in Denmark. I just wanted to let you know that in Denmark, we take construction moisture very seriously. We check moisture content before we close framing. We run heaters and dehumidifiers during the drying stage and even in summer if required. Even the painters check moisture content of the internal face of the external brick walls before applying finishes. There's no question here. I just thought that was a great
I remember reading that comment, actually.
And you were relieved that it didn't require an answer.
It was nice. We got to the end. I was like, hey, no answer required.
I don't even
check
have to
that box.
Tell this person thank you for emailing.
That's an easy one. Good job.
I think it's a great point. The idea that trust but verify. That unless you know, you don't know. So the idea of just saying, oh, well, the house has been going for a while, so it's dry. That's not the same thing as we know it's dry.
And I think we do know there are trades that check the moisture content of materials. Hardwood flooring, that's a big deal for them. But I never heard of a painter, even though the trigger on the Delmhorst pin type moisture meter for the yellow light is 15%. And that's not for mold or mildew. That's the maximum it should be for before you apply a finished surface to something. So that's kind of interesting that the meter's set up for that.
It also made me happy that we're doing a lot of the same stuff. I mean, we don't
Across
have
the
external brick that they're going to be applying a finish to, but
what do they call the Atlantic Ocean? The big,
pond?
The big pond. I don't
know. I'm just happy we got somebody in the UK listening to us.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, he's in Denmark.
Special.
If you paid attention, he's in Denmark.
Well, he's from UK. Okay.
Correct.
So I did listen.
I'm from Colombia. That doesn't mean that I'm...
Yeah, who cares? Nobody cares.
All right, the next one is from
Who cares
B.
about Missouri. And
By the way, thank you to Paul.
Yeah, I agree. Love your show. Unless I have not been putting in the right keywords to get this information, I have not been very successful at finding more information regarding good practices to keep a slab foundation strong through the years. I remember a foundation repair guy came over to a previous house of ours, and he said it was important to keep the bottom part of the slab moistened to keep its strength. Is this myth or fact? Let's start with that. This is a two-part thing here.
Yeah. Wow.
So we're talking about building in the building process. That's different than lifetime of the house, right?
Right. And we know that a lot of concrete crews, particularly for flat work, like to have the water cement ratio too high because they like to push it around more easily. Workability. And that has a big impact on the strength of the concrete and how it cures, right? But I have never heard of anybody saying that I need to maintain a certain moisture content for the concrete to continue to be durable.
Yeah. So the one thing that came to mind when I read that, I remember growing up and I actually saw one of my neighbors doing it. A dry spell in Columbia, Missouri. We have very expansive soil and people are outside watering their foundation. Like the 1 hour worth of water that you put on it every day is going to be the thing that makes your house not fall down or fall down.
Well, that's interesting because that's about the clay, not about the concrete.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting.
So that's the only thing that I've ever heard that had to do with the overall moisture content of what's going on in the house at long term.
Well, and this whole issue of putting in a sand layer beneath the concrete with the idea that if you do that, it allows the concrete to dry down as well as up. And that led to all kinds of problems in the Building America program. We were a Building Science Corporation because it just becomes a reservoir for moisture. But the concrete guys do not like to have a plastic barrier right underneath the concrete because then it doesn't dry down at all. So I remember Joe Stiebrick saying more than once, we have to stop doing slab work for the immediacy and the ease of installation when it's got to be durable for the life of the building.
Your pour is one day.
Exactly.
The house is going to be here forever.
It's a casting, actually.
Sorry,
Casting,
you're correct.
I got corrected by, I think it was Joe.
Construction engineer at school used to correct us all the time. You pour lemonade, you cast concrete.
Well, and Joe said part of the problem with pour is that there's too much emphasis on water, not enough on cement.
Also, when you say lemonade instead of you pour water, lemonade sounds more belittling too. So that's a good choice on his part.
I'm into.
Yeah. So I'm going to say that is a total myth, and that is not based in science, and somebody's just decided at some point.
Although I might consider a drip irrigation system under my future slabs.
And by the way, when I was doing work on negative side waterproofing, I read a book by a guy who is the seminal work on concrete. And now I can't remember his name, so we'll have to make sure.
So that's a good reference.
Pete's resource under this Q&A would be this guy whose name I can't remember. Damn.
We'll
get it to you. It's a great book on concrete.
Also from B. I thought I read somewhere that it is not ideal to have mulch and dirt right up against the slab foundation, and that it's a good idea to have something like bull rock for the first 12 or so inches right against the slab foundation. What about trees? Are we going to say no to a live oak and their invasive root system? But are there any trees that would be good for her area? And it's Houston. So let's take that in a couple parts. Mulch and dirt right up against the foundation. As a builder, I'm going to say, yeah, no, I don't want it right up against the foundation just from a, like, you're giving termites a better path to the house. You're giving bugs and insects a better access route to the house.
I have some interesting insight on this one. So
can we judge whether or not it's interesting? And you just say it's insight?
I'm just going to tell you. I'm going to preempt it, but that's not what I was looking for.
Sorry.
It's in the same boat with your buddy's name there. Anyways, so the problem that I've seen with mulch, honestly, is people add it every year, and as they add it, like, you create these gullies against the house, and it actually holds water against the foundation. And the first year the house is built, you might have a negative slope away from the house, but a couple years of mulching, now that thing is perfectly level, or in some cases tilting back towards the house.
Sure. We see it all the time. We see mulch up over the edge of the siding. You're getting, especially on walkouts, where there's a step in the foundation, the landscaping doesn't align with the step in the foundation. All of a sudden you have that wall that is wood and concrete, that union on the vertical or the horizontal happening inside of a planting bed. And it's like, yeah, this is easy. We pull all that crap away from the house.
And both...
No more mulch. We should get rid of it entirely.
Both pea stone and mulch break the fall of whatever's coming off the roof if you don't have gutters. But I hadn't thought about this, but the pea stone is not going to, is a better material because it's not organic.
Yeah.
And then she talks about trees. Yeah, we're not going to plant big, heavy.
Well, I think the root system is certainly one. I'd be more worried about the leaves and all the crap that falls on my roof.
Falling on the roof every storm.
And just the water and the organic material. You get moss growing on your shingles. The shingles deteriorate, develop leaks. Age of roof goes down. I'd worry more about that than I would worry about a root pushing up against the concrete.
I can think of a lot of reasons not to put a big tree next to the house. I'm trying to figure out why you would want to put a big tree right next to the house.
I mean, we have a couple. So we built our house in an infill area, and there were 50-year-old trees already on the property. We built our house in the shade. Like, it's not right up against the house, but our house is shaded for a lot of the year once the trees leaf out.
Yeah, but their root systems, you already kind of knew where they were when you dug your foundation.
But I think it's a good point for how we should be operating from a landscaping standpoint for our houses. We should be back far enough that you can walk between the landscape and the house, because I don't want those bushes rubbing up against my siding or the windows or anything like that. I don't want, we went through a big period in our market of taking out yew bushes that are right up against the house that were planted at 60s ranches that have tap roots that are like 6 or 8 inches in diameter.
Yeah.
And it's like, those suckers are causing foundation problems.
Yeah. We actually have exactly what you're talking about in front of our house here in Durham, New Hampshire.
I noticed that when I walked in.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
You're so gentle.
Okay, from Mark. There has been a lot of discussion.
Is this Mark from Kansas?
I don't know who this is. There's been a lot of discussion about the use of HRVs and ERVs in home construction, and several posts also discussing the need to include whole home dehumidifiers to regulate humidity levels within these tighter homes. With the HEPA filters on some of these ventilating dehumidifiers, is there a case going to just use a ventilating dehumidifier and skip the HRV ERV?
Whoa, that's interesting. Okay, so we know that the HRV, which is the heat recovery ventilator, which only transfers sensible load from the two air streams. Then we have an energy recovery ventilator, which I think can also be called an enthalpic recovery ventilator, because enthalpic means both the latent and the sensible load, and that transfer between the two air streams. So let's start with, you can't dehumidify interior air with an ERV. You can help to maintain the difference in moisture content between the incoming and outgoing streams, but you're not actually, it's not a heat pump. You can't actually move moisture against the gradient. You can only sort of temper the blending of the two latent content. So,
and an HRV doesn't.
And an HRV, well, interestingly, HRVs dehumidify during the winter quite often, but that's just incidental, right? So
is that a product of the heating element?
Well, it's that the warm, moist air inside gets pumped out, right? And dry air comes in.
Dry air in.
It's not by sort of design. It's just happenstance.
It's the air that it's bringing in. It's not a mechanism that the device is doing. It's the air that it's transporting.
Exactly.
Sorry.
So they do dehumidify, but it's not their purpose, and they certainly can't do it when you need the dehumidification most, which is during the summer. Yeah. So when do you need to whole house dehumidify? And to me, that's a really interesting question, because as we build better buildings, we increase the length of the shoulder seasons, which means that there are more times that the house doesn't need cooling and heating, but might need dehumidification. So this falls under one of Joe Stiebrick's favorite phrases I have, which is no good deed goes unpunished. You've now made the house perform better. You've increased the shoulder seasons, which is great because you're not heating or cooling, but now all of a sudden you may need whole house dehumidification.
So in other words, when it's 75 degrees outside and my house is staying cool enough that my AC doesn't kick on.
Exactly.
The air conditioning is no longer providing dehumidification, or if it is running, it's not running for long enough cycles to make a difference. And so now we have a humidity issue that we have to figure out how to deal with.
And this led to a ton of work by Building Science Corporation at the tail end of us being there, Steve, where Armin Rudd and Joe were doing quite a bit of work on can we do whole house dehumidification without buying a dehumidifier designed to be integrated with the space conditioning, heating and cooling, because they're more expensive. And they tried to do like a big box version of a $350, small quantity dehumidifier in a closet that was tied to the mechanical system. So it's sort of an inexpensive way of getting that dehumidification spread over the whole building. And that's tough. To do a less expensive version of whole house dehumidification. It's funny you should say that, because I have now a ducted dehumidifier not connected to the space conditioning system of our new house here. But it's designed to dehumidify the entire the basement floor, which is about 1,200 square feet.
And so the issue, well, I guess if you're filtering the dehumidifier, and it really, the problem is we're not bringing in any new air at that point, right? That's our challenge.
Well, so I think this gets to the sort of the magic box question. Do we have a system that is designed to space condition, humidify, dehumidify, and ventilate? And we get back to that question of the amount of air you need to move to heat and cool is so different than the amount of air you need to ventilate that we're caught in this.
They're already going to have separate motors and separate ducts and things that lead different directions and serve different purposes.
And even if you get the loads down to tiny, tiny space conditioning loads, you still have the problem of needing to move more air to space condition than to ventilate.
So,
does that make sense?
No, probably not, Mark. It's a nice idea. I like the thinking outside the box that you have going there, but I think that what you're saying. They're separate things. They do separate things. The load that they have is the challenge.
One last thing I will say is that ACA, the Air Conditioning Contractors of America, has a new manual. There's manual J, S, and D, but there's a new one called LLH, which is manual for low load homes. And a big part of that manual is by climate, do you need to whole house dehumidify, or what does that load look like? So I'd suggest that be a resource for this one.
And so just so you guys know, we're not recording in our normal space. We're actually recording at in Peter's world headquarters here.
Wait, hold on.
Building right.
Not the normal space?
Well, that's the only space that we've recorded in, right?
I know, but why can't this be an equal recording
Studio B.
Studio B. Thank you.
World
Studio
headquarters
B.
of Building Right. And as you mentioned, there is a dehumidifier in the space. Tell us a little bit about the dehumidifier and why you chose to put one in.
Yeah. So the square footage in this basement is about the same square footage as the first floor. It's only a 2-story building. And we don't need dehumidification on the second floor in the summer because the air conditioning is running enough in the second floor, that zone, to give us the dehumidification we need. But there's almost no need in the basement for cooling, but the relative humidity is about 66%. So we needed a whole space dehumidification. So maybe we'll do a short video on this that we can connect to this podcast, but we used an Ultra 70 from Santa Fe, and it's 8-inch duct. So we pull air from the finished part of the basement through the dehumidifier. It exhausts into the unfinished basement. The door right behind me is louvered, and so the two spaces are connected. The waste heat from the dehumidifier gets dumped into the unfinished basement, which actually is cooler than this part. So it's working out great. It's a relatively quiet, really highly efficient dehumidifier. And I'm going to use a Humid Pro from Honeywell to do a remote sensor so that the dehumidifier is not reading from the laundry room. It's reading from the center of the space here in the finished basement.
And you guys are Climate Zone
6. But hats off to Santa Fe for having, a really, really good line of dehumidifiers for all sites, all sorts of spot and whole building dehumidification system.
And when we start talking about all these systems, there's this push to make mechanical rooms that much bigger because they have other things going into them. The ductwork on that thing is almost the same size as the dehumidifier.
It is. It's pretty
it's a
cool.
tiny suitcase. It's mounted over top of other things that aren't the mechanical room. It fits nicely in there.
Yeah, it's a well-engineered system of dehumidifiers, no doubt.
Steve, do you have any closing comments on any of these questions?
In the future, I need to bring caramels in a book for these podcast recordings.
Caramels in a book.
And a comfy chair.
So that's something I do when Peter's talking. Or answering a question.
There are many people that would say, I need alcohol in a book, but you chose caramels. That's really interesting.
Well, if you think about it, it's just as arbitrary as a cup of coffee or...
I thought you were going to say...
You don't even know what movie that's from, do you?
No.
It gets really sticky to talk about Peter.
No? Is it from Grease?
No.
Those are the only movies
Good
I know
Will
you
Hunting.
like. Okay.
Oh, Good Will Hunting.
Yeah, when he talks to the girl and he says, why don't we go for a couple or some caramels in the morning? And she says, why not coffee? He said, well, caramels are just as arbitrary as a cup of coffee.
Yeah. I don't remember that from the book, from the movie.
Yeah. So anyway.
Was that Minnie Driver? Who was it? Yeah.
Who would have thought that this was how this podcast was going to end? Peter talking about Minnie Driver. Okay, so we need to remind you that we have a YouTube channel, that the podcast has a YouTube channel.
Smash that subscribe button.
Exactly.
Smash?
That's what he says. Someone convinced him that was better than saying it another
hit
way.
is just such a weak word. Nobody remembers hit the subscribe button. People remember smash. Whew. Remember the watermelon guy?
Gallagher?
Don't
remember him that well, do you?
smashes watermelons. So I remember like seeing him smashing. He had the little like Irish cap and stuff.
Am I?
He would smash watermelons with his.
You might be, but it was like
No,
it was
you're not too old for this.
New when I was young and learned about it.
He was a comedian. People in the front row had to wear poly, so there's building science tied into it.
So
Moisture barriers and
So Mini Driver and Gallagher.
make sure you go to the to the podcast on YouTube. There is content other than these podcasts that you're able to listen to.
And for the record, you brought up Top Gun first this time.
I did. You're
so
right.
It says he's on an anti-military
No.
or a pro-military. Sorry. He's on a pro-military movement here. He's trying to dig out of his hole, but that's all right, people.
Is it a foxhole?
I got your back.
Thanks, Peter. I'm not going to get through this. This is
Smash that subscribe button. Go to YouTube. Watch us. Leave some great comments. Throw your questions up here so in the future we have something to talk about. And make the questions like really easy or really fun, not this dehumidification stuff where Peter rants for 45 minutes. I want to all have fun. But anyways.
And we should note, if you comment on one of the YouTube videos and you're asking Steve a specific question, if he doesn't answer, it's because he doesn't think your question is worth his time. You should know that he goes, nah.
What was the comment I just heard on that?
See?
I'm not bored enough to talk to you right now. It's like the perfect insult. Excuse me, I'm really not bored enough to talk to you right now.
Wow.
I said that to the person on the plane the other day. They kind of looked at me like I had three heads, but that's all right.
That's the benefit
done here?
of being... No, not yet. Why not? That's the benefit of being your size.
Yeah, you can kind of look at people and say,
like,
hey, how you doing? Are you going home? Just shut up.
Yeah.
I'm really not bored enough to talk to you
Not
right
today.
now.
Okay.
What's none of your goddamn
I'm going
business?
to put on one of my Saturday Night Live muscle. Remember those goats?
Hey, I'm making a shout out. I was telling these guys, I sat behind Myles Garrett the other day. He's like defensive end for Cincinnati Bengals. Just total bad man. He was.
He means that in a
And
good way.
he scared you.
He was frightening. When you take a look at this guy,
I've never seen you frightened.
He was like, holy crap! Like I want this guy to be my friend always.
Yeah.
Well, that
So you didn't say to him,
No,
I'm not bored
He was actually
enough.
a really cool guy. He said hello.
since we're closing this out with the longest ending in history,
It's not quite the longest ending in history, but there's this Donna Summer song that ran on for like I forget what it is.
Steve and I walking around IBS this year. He goes, "Hey, that guy's really tall." And as we got closer to him, you're
He was
taller
like
than
by
him.
my shoulder. But that happens all the time. Like it happens to me all the time at like airports and stuff. I go, holy crap, look at the size of that guy. And then I walk by him and the guy's like up to my
You
shoulder.
can see the top of his head.
All right.
Okay.
Anyways.
There it is. That's
Hey,
where
we
we
did see
leave
the
it.
world's smallest person today at breakfast.
Yes, we did.
This girl was probably like 80 pounds.
Wow.
It was kind of frightening.
So we'll leave it on that one.
Okay. Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
See ya.